What dang azu landre denma kashugore. Da landre gudanda dang azu kashugore da dane dang aru tu sinje kande jiba ina ya. Ane shemale ngesun ria gabayo maris. Ane ngesun thage. Ane ngesun dungele ngeban june. Ane dendrul ria salu de o de sanje ki shuju tambu do teres marbe.
So we've been going over the text by the great master Atisha, the lamp for the path to enlightenment, and the explicit meaning that is contained in it. The true meaning of this text goes over the various types of sentient beings and their aptitudes or their affinities for different types of motivation. A being who wishes to renounce the various types of suffering of the lower realms and wishes to achieve rebirth in future lives in the higher realms and does not have a scope that is beyond that, falls into the category of the first level of explanation that Buddha gave of types of beings who are Buddhists, or who fall into the category of Buddhists.
What the Tananga to Labal Yoris, Hinaya, and Mail Kumatabaris, Mataba, Junior Maris, and the Kumataba Nes with Shawandu, Joashama Mena Aborate Hinaya, Joashama Yovaris, Mebamar, Joashama Yovaris, Dendutangendo, Nil Doris, and then out to Dendul Droina, Chibu Yovaris, Nason Donanga to Chibu Yomaris. Things also Sanjay. Dendrul Tautute and Tashindu Sewar, Jundu Dugore, Nasun Kayage, and Karsugore, Deba Mago to the Kawars, Marba.
Okay. So at this moment we have the human basis. We have a human form which has so many different abilities, and at this moment it's in our very hands, and we possess this. And because we possess this human basis, we also possess the mind of a human. And that mind is quite intelligent and has many abilities as well. So at this moment, in the palm of our hands, we have all of these special abilities because we have the human basis and the mind that it possesses. But this human basis disintegrates. It is impermanent. The nature of impermanence is momentary disintegration. So this will not last very long. This human form that we have taken on at this moment is brief and will not go on forever because its nature is impermanence. So if future and past lives didn't exist, then it wouldn't really matter what we did in this particular life. But the fact remains that there are future lives and there are past lives, and there is proof of the existence of these. So knowing this, we have to figure out what would be beneficial for us in our future lives. And there are only two places that we can end up within cyclic existence. And those two places are the higher realms and the lower realms. If we are able to be born into the higher realms of the gods and the humans and so forth, we will have happiness. But if we were born into the lower realms of the hell beings and the hungry ghosts and the animals, we will have to suffer. So it's necessary for us to figure out what the causal factors for that suffering are, and then it's necessary for us to abandon them if we do not wish to have to endure the suffering. So when we look very closely, we find out that misdeeds and non-virtues are the causal factors for suffering. So they are the causal factors for the lower realms of rebirth because they are plagued with suffering. So we need to then abandon the causal factors if we wish to be free from their results.
당아주 새들 새zam부터 새도자니 요아르스 새도자 되게 손도 소용하르 새도자 전부기 녀와 새도자 딘즈게다 새도자 중국되게 서거르베다 네 돈을 제노와르스 다 새zam부터 쳐본진 중국송 요아르스 새zam부 쳐와되게 할로와르스 딘되게 데미가 네 타마되게 네 멀제와르스 대인 손도 어떤 아주 서서지야 계셔버렸어.
So there are two different kinds of minds that can produce results. There are positive minds and there are negative minds, or bad minds, literally translated. So positive and negative minds. So a positive mind at its greatest level produces rebirths into the God's realm. And a positive mind at its medium level produces rebirth into the demigod's realm. And a positive mind at its smallest level produces rebirth into the human realms. Then when we move to the negative mind, that also produces results. And the greatest level of a negative mind produces rebirth into the hell realms. The more midland or medium level of a negative mind produces rebirth into the hungry ghost realm. And the smaller level of a negative mind or a non-virtuous state of mind produces rebirth into the animal realm. So we can see that the two different types of minds have various types of potentials that they can produce. The chi ni, the donaga.
다분한 디바마고 주요로. 저거는 지분바 있는 추진레스, 일본의 추진레스, 일본의 추진레스, 저번의 추진이 아주레스.
Less.
아니, 보마도 봐도 샤나아버지 워레스.
Less. So when we speak of non-virtues and categorize them relative to the 10 non-virtues, it's very good if we can abandon even one of them, or two of them, or three of them. The best is if we can abandon all of the 10 non-virtues. But if we can't do that, then there is a way that we can confess in order to purify, or have acknowledgement of our downfalls in order to purify the negativities that they produce.
어제 다들은 가서 멜 내손을 타는 메탈할 집에 있나요? 그 네 메탈할에 동에 두었어. 지 동에 가이 동에 지 동에 동에 주 동에 차반 주제지 동에 단도 요소서 어때 네 때도 더요 말이스. 어때 뭐발라 때는 가서 그 뒤주 레더 녀모 봐. 오늘 타바 도야게. 동에도 군중 몸이 타바 도야게. 타우주들이 봐. 니바서 그러다. 제본디도 도모이나 테메도 나서 그러봐. 테메도 도모이나.
That's so. When a type of being looks at the suffering of the lower realms and wishes to abandon that, but also looks to the higher realms and sees that the gods and the humans also have to suffer, and recognizes that they have the suffering of birth, the suffering of aging, the suffering of sickness, and the suffering of death. So all 6 realms of cyclic existence have a pervasive kind of suffering. So when that type of being wishes to abandon all of the 6 realms of cyclic existence, even the higher realms, then he or she falls into the category of a being of medium capacity, and practices the teachings that are shared in common with beings of the medium capacity. So these teachings are the pathway to liberation. And the way that this type of practitioner achieves his or her liberation or nirvana is by abandoning the karma and afflictions which produce the negative types of rebirth. And through abandoning those karma and afflictions, he or she is able to produce nirvana or liberation, which is the abandonment of the necessity for rebirth into any of the 6 realms of cyclic existence, because he or she recognizes that all 6 realms of cyclic existence contain suffering.
어제 다드네 그 동에 다 녀모발 타게 다시 가르치고 왔는데 산지를 하바송 송거스 하바 주진지 라바 띵한지 라바 셰러지 라바스 셰러지 라바스나 가르스나 동에도 주 강라 되는 쇼와르스나 레일 되는 쇼와르스 레 뇨몰라 되는 쇼와르스 뇨모 덴질라 되는 쇼와르스 저 단지 덴데 데모 마주도 셰러지 라바스 그레스 저 단지 데모 마주비 돈이도 셰러 돈을 고아차도 공바이나 안에 동에 그 자와 덴질 넣는 그레스 덴질 넣 소나 덴질 그 데모 뇨몰 넣는 그래 레일 넣는 그래 동에 갈래갈랑가네 tabal draya yungya yuwaris what the laden zuwaris marba.
So this type of practitioner must rely on the truth of path. He or she must practice the 3 higher trainings in order to achieve the goal of nirvana or liberation. The 3 higher trainings of ethics, concentration, and wisdom. All of these 3 higher trainings are necessary for this type of practitioner to achieve nirvana because it's actions and so forth that create the afflictions. It's the actions and the afflictions and so forth that create the suffering of cyclic existence. And it's the grasping at true existence which creates the action and the affliction. So at the root of the suffering of cyclic existence, we can see it as the grasping at true existence or the grasping at true establishment. So it's necessary to have familiarization or meditation on the non-mistaken view that recognizes that phenomena are not truly established. They dependently originate, and because of this dependent origination, they are not inherently existent or truly established. So by meditating on this and familiarizing our minds with this, we can lessen the grasping at true existence. And when the grasping at true existence is lessened, then its effect is lessened. And when the grasping at true existence is abandoned completely, then all of its results are completely abandoned. So cyclic existence is abandoned completely once the grasping at true existence is completely abandoned. So in order to abandon this grasping, it's necessary for a practitioner to be involved with the 3 higher trainings.
최단지 대면 두 셰러데 타바드 많이 바시블로 나머레스 타바드 지블로 덴진 나머레스 타바드 많이 바시숨 타바드 지블로 너너도와스 제바도 더라베이서스.
It's very similar to recognizing that a snake, it's very similar to recognizing that a rope in a dark room is not a snake, and having that wisdom to recognize that it is just a rope. Likewise, one can recognize that phenomena are not truly established, do not truly exist in any way more than that rope exists as a snake. So we need to, that rope exists as a snake. So phenomena do not truly exist in the same way that a rope is not a snake.
다 돈이 시바이나 돈이라 미비 띵에지 때문에 맨나 안 돈이 시체 돈이 두 비셔도 야부 용고 말이스 돈이라 미비 띵에지 라바도 계셔버리스 돈이라 미네 샤마타 공화도 계셔버리스.
So it's very important in order to have the realization of emptiness or to have a realization of the nature of reality to rely upon meditation or single-pointed concentration, which uses emptiness as its object of observation. So it's necessary to rely upon the various levels of concentration and focus that single-pointed meditation or single-pointed concentration on emptiness itself or the nature of reality itself. So this is why the higher training in concentration is so crucial to achieving the goal.
어쨌든 대툴 슈팅하고 좋은다. 뜻은 소소나 안에 돈이 두고 싫어되게 댄지도 녀모가 보는 탑을 두고 그랬어. 말해.
So, and then we also must couple that with the ethics or ethical behavior. If we have these 3 higher trainings, then we would be able to easily achieve the wisdom realizing emptiness, which can then abandon or eradicate the grasping at true existence, which is at the root or creation of cyclic existence or suffering in general.
단도 차동 콘도도 어디서 그가 제사도 그걸 시치고 시다 요아래데 이내가 쿠들로 시레스 나도 생 잡아나무레스 주는 갈래갈 다노레스 추가도로 준 담아다노도 떠나지 돈이도 셔라다 띵엔진다 주디도 냐래 아버지나 안에 생을 고대하고 녀모바다 안에 가서 그래 디바도 갈래갈 다노서 타바도야 생상마 차원진서레스.
So, when we have various types of negativities within our mind or continuum, we have negativities such as attachment, aversion, jealousy, or pride, and so forth. It's very similar to having a dirty cloth, but a cloth itself can be cleaned. The stain can be taken out of a cloth, just like our minds can be cleaned of these various afflicted states. So by relying on the three higher trainings, we can slowly clean away the dirt. We can slowly clean away the afflictions and so forth within our continuums, in the same way that we can clean the stain or dirt out of a cloth.
다보고 저절 허를 지마이나 다보고 메셰바 모보요아레스 루로셰당 모바 모보요아레스 글라당 지라 담보니바 소바 칼레칼레코 모보셰소나 안네 메셰바 모보센다네 센자마자네 모보셰바 용도스 케바차 용도스 뜻다빈서레스.
So it's very similar to this example. When a small child begins his or her education, there's not a lot of understanding there. There is a lot of misknowing, is a literal translation, or ignorance. So there's a lot of misknowing. But then when they go through first grade and second grade and third grade and fourth grade, a large amount of the misknowing is eradicated, or the ignorance relative to various subjects is eradicated through the levels of school when he or she studies them. And eventually, he or she will have the ability to become a great scholar, possibly. So we can see that ignorance can be eradicated in this example, and we can see very clearly that it is possible.
와드네 아세고 체톨레온도 다 나로 집 타바도야다 동에 매바잖아요 야보다레디네 아니 세제 갈로게 아니 세제 타지게 되네 가르주고래 도와도고래 세제 타지게 동은도고 말에 아니 세제 타지 동은도 되나 세제 타지 도와는 거 봐 쇼나냐 그거 디제도 세제 타지게 또 사지고 또 군요 살로 해소나 아니 베지 대바 재미 줄 장고 말বে.
So, when a practitioner recognizes that, yes, it is wonderful if I can attain liberation for myself alone, this is a great thing, but there are other sentient beings, and like myself, all other sentient beings wish to have happiness. And like myself, all other sentient beings wish to be free from suffering. The type of practitioner that recognizes this then wishes to find a way to bring all sentient beings to a state of happiness which is free from suffering, and then recognizes that the only way that he or she can do that is by becoming a Buddha. So then he or she wishes to become a Buddha in order to free all sentient beings from the state of suffering. He or she wishes to reach the state of unsurpassable, true, complete enlightenment. This type of practitioner is called a practitioner of the great vehicle. And previously, one thing I forgot, the medium scope practitioner is the lesser vehicle, or the Hinayana, whereas this great scope practitioner, the great vehicle, or Mahayana, falls into the category of great vehicle or Mahayana.
샹추 생 공부 주되는 준비 명아 뒤주고는 세집이 주던 다전야바 주고는 세집 주니 송대르스 말베 되네 장주 생공 취지래 아니 세장한테 많이 먹은 거 맛이 띵띵띵서 영어想봐 이제 라상 주주 what 고기나 아니 장주 생 줄지 거레스 아니 사제 고공 갈갈 투는 거레스 타주 지레스 되는 쇼지네 라진질 준다 진진질 아유된다 요거네 다전냐바 지군 생주주 what 되니 그토네 장주 생공주 카니 송거레스 말베
the Shambi Rik Tang Jamyang Rik Ming Lago. Okay. So the two, when we speak of the mind that aspires to enlightenment or bodhicitta, there are the two lineages passed down for the achievement of this mind that aspires to enlightenment. The lineage of the extensive deed, which is the 7-point cause and effect for achieving bodhicitta, and the lineage of the profound view, which is the equalizing and exchanging self with others practice for achieving bodhicitta. The 7-point cause and effect practice for achieving bodhicitta has 6 steps and 1 result, which is the bodhicitta. The 6 steps are recognizing that all sentient beings are our mother, remembering their kindness, wishing to repay their kindness, love through the force of attraction, great compassion, and the extraordinary attitude. And those 6 produce the mind that aspires to enlightenment or bodhicitta. The second type of instruction passed through the profound view lineage is called equalizing and exchanging self and others. And at the core of that practice is the recognition of the downfalls of the self-cherishing attitude and the recognition of the excellent qualities of a mind that cherishes others or an attitude that cherishes others. So this is the equalizing and exchanging self, at the root of the equalizing and exchanging self with others practice. And these are the 2 instructions passed down for achieving the realization of the mind that aspires to enlightenment or bodhicitta.
Momosan matana ko lole joandel hea kale kavares ane momo mosan tamba ina kale ko ane shugul no lo sha na sen soyung wores
shugul num hakoson
lo ina ko tene
kale then drogamare
san momo tana tene sen tembo
chagadu okay to chena. So when we first hear of these instructions, understanding them intellectually is quite easy. Quite easy to understand them. But if we don't go over them again and again and don't familiarize ourselves regularly with them, we will not produce any kind of realization into these topics. They will be intellectually understood but not realized. So it's necessary to think again and again and again over these things in order to realize them. It's very similar to a piece of paper and putting oil onto the paper. Very slowly the oil seeps into the paper, but once that oil is absorbed completely into that paper, it's there and it's very, very stable. Likewise, once we familiarize ourselves again and again with these instructions, our bodhicitta and our realization into these instructions will become very stable and very, very stable or similar to the oil that has been absorbed into a piece of paper. So by relying on this again and again and constantly familiarizing ourselves with this, we accumulate a great amount of merit, and we accumulate a great amount of virtue. And by doing that, we will be able to be free from the lower realms in our future life anyway. So by relying on these practices, we will be able to achieve freedom from the lower realms as a byproduct of the practice. This thought that I would wish to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings, this aspiring mind, is actually the door to the Mahayana. Bodhicitta is the door to the Mahayana, once one has this thought and has this realization, then he or she becomes a bodhisattva and becomes a Mahayanist. So it is said that the bodhicitta is the door to the Mahayana.
大想就是三界呢，时间当这个当中，上就公布土包小我那边上路的月把章节，上就个三月把章节长节图嘛的是，那个的故事呢，套老故事套嘛的吧，我新竹没得是个的吧，像新竹老故事新竹，谁说的吧？什么？我这套老故事什么的吧？
So just reliance upon the mind that aspires to enlightenment is not enough to achieve the state of unsurpassable, true, complete enlightenment. Just by having the wish to become a Buddha in order to free all sentient beings from suffering will not make that state automatically happen. There must be a method in order to achieve that. And one must practice the 6 perfections in order to achieve that result.
大想就觉得三界呢，土木啊，爬行地巴老比去当哈老比去，你来的我的是，浪人的嘛，都当哈你来的个是。
So when we speak of the means of achieving or method to achieving complete Buddhahood, there are the 2 vehicles, the perfection vehicle and the tantric vehicle, both being in the category of the great vehicle.
大爬行地巴老比去的啦，真的出天就老比去，应该这就老比去，写到就老比去，松用过的是松，对吧
？In the perfection vehicle, there is a great reliance on the 3 highest higher trainings, and that is the highest higher training of ethics, the highest higher training in concentration, and highest higher training in wisdom. And translators note we went over previously why it's called highest higher training. If anyone wasn't here, they can ask others who were.
다 털라기인한다, 싫어라기인한다, 간데 너트 maybe 싫어라고 더 너트 maybe 털라고 그랬어. 더 너주다 싫어 너주라나 내분 너주 좋은 거래. 사제시대 와요 말이지 그러나.
Yanja Suranang.
야.
강이 쓰는데 안주 야부고마송.
더 가서 그래. 오늘 더 비답을 하고 그랬어. 더 롱이 더 라소나 레버 롱거 좋은 거래.
Neutral top.
뉴트가 더 라나 레버 뉴트가 좋은 거래.
Lasso.
롱이 송 라소나 레버 야부 용어 말했어. 오늘 그 송다 더 야부질 하고 그랬어.
So, there are all different sorts of methods, but we must rely upon a real method if we want to achieve the goal. Because if we rely upon bad methods, we won't achieve the desired result. We would achieve something bad or negative if we rely on negative methods. So it's important for us to have non-mistaken method. It's important for us to have non-mistaken wisdom. It's important for us to have the real, true wisdom and the real, true method that is unsullied.
어제 더 능주다 더 노아다 더 마노아 안 가다가다 산당 워스나 안 이제 그 하상지 좀 버렸어 안 별로 가서 사이가 졸라간 그러면 그만 줘낸다 안 주제 저송
로펜 페마준네 마마선바바
페마선바
오케이
페마선바 어제 기진시 와서 어디 좀 갈려냥도 네 사이 졸라간 차도 안 들로전 제게는 갈라지 나무조레스 안들 자기 잡아먹고 델로전 제가 용거레스 데네 자이 잡아지 개와 잡아레스 하정 코 개와 자네 아노 코 돈이도 코 로바고 송레스
라서
돈이 로바고 그 개와 요하레스 개와 콜라 그거 말레스 데네 그 돈이데 상로 지야 마당 공잡아 돈이레스
라서
아네 상로 가게 마당 단도스 공잡아데 요송스게도 어때서 안 당거레스 그 대시도 그레스 콜라 사지가 너무 부담해요 아레스 근데 왜 그시에도 말이지
then samo gugumare king napo ki garbo
what did they 그자들에 더 논주 what the 소리들스
that's
That Tony is again the Kaka on the Matan, Deja Bandusan, Deja Batel, Tony was what there is. That's his Parabajan to Zukalo, Tony Mashaking, Tony Goma Shaking Zole, the Gus Baramato, Tony Abagon shares on the Jimbatan, to go Marjavata, to Sukna Moja.
Okay. So when we speak of positive and negative methods, or mistaken methods and non-mistaken methods, we can see historically the story of the Chinese abbot. He's called the Chinese abbot or Hashan. And during Tibet, the previous times in Tibet, two great masters, Padmasambhava and Chandrashita, had built various monasteries. And there were monks who were studying the great texts, and many Chinese monks and so forth. And this master named Hashan came, who was very much an erudite scholar who had a vast understanding of Scripture and the words in Scripture, but had a mistaken view of emptiness and had the incorrect understanding of the nature of reality. And he accumulated a vast number of actual students, and it was his belief that the correct view of emptiness and the way that one would achieve the correct view of emptiness was by emptying the mind of thought altogether, was by not relying upon conceptuality at all. It was by trying to completely empty the mind of thought to the point when it was a blank state, to the point where there was absolutely nothingness in the mind, and that was thought to have been the realization of emptiness by the Chinese abbot, by Hashan. And he felt that whether one gets bit by a black dog or one gets bit by a white dog, the biting is the same. Likewise, if one has positive conceptual thought or one has negative conceptual thought, it's all conceptual thought, so it is an obstacle to being able to understand emptiness. So conceptual thought must be abandoned, and a blank slate state must be conceived or achieved. And once one understands the emptiness according to Hashan's view, it's not necessary, because of this nothingness state, to practice the six perfections. It's not necessary to practice generosity. It's not necessary to practice concentration, wisdom, or any of these other six perfections, because of the fact that the emptiness itself is just a blank state. So this wrong, mistaken view of emptiness was passed down by this master, Hashan, in Tibet.
And Saji Shindul Hogus, Tenson was Jimba to shooting to the cage of this. The Zuka Tony Mashik and Lamba to Telson was Tony shares one of the Guya Marif. Tony shares Tadula and the Jimba shooting to Zukalo Tenzin, Ponjaris. Ting Nabel Lesson and Yamadi, Ting Kabel Lesson and Yamadi was. Check up so doesn't Nazatang to us, Chenabu so done Nazatang to us. Seg Tabak Lava Dama in Nazatangre, Chag Tabak Lava Dana,
the Anjur Suranang.
Say gold, Jayoman, dus. Nazatangres, Sedan, Chag, Jibaris,
Ale, Yabudu. De Nama Anjur Gumasan.
Yeah.
Okay. So the belief of this master was that, it was, others stated, well, what about this? The Buddha taught the six perfections. And he said, well, that was for those who didn't understand emptiness completely. And once you understand emptiness completely, it's not necessary to engage in those practices. So he then said, all generosity and the six perfections and so forth is grasping at true existence because it is conceptual. And because there is grasping at true existence there, it is negative. So he gave all these examples. If one gets bit by a white dog or a black dog, then it's the same. There is a bite. If a black cloud or a white cloud covers the sun, there is still coverage of the sun. Didn't matter whether it was a white cloud or a black cloud. If someone is in jail and has iron handcuffs or has golden handcuffs, it doesn't matter. So Hashan stated that conceptual thought altogether was an abandonment was an object of abandonment and actually was the cause of the grasping at true existence. So analytical meditation was not utilized and was looked at as a downfall.
다 하상 그 따와데 다그 각 계산 따져 마당도 공사바도 비지 다 원내 사지 다 돈이 돈에 테레스 그들라도 말이야 산당좀 산당도 가가 되지레스 그때 산당이지.
So he thought the true Buddha's true view, he asserted, was to just not think, just to sit and have absolutely a mindless state. Or a state of empty mind. And that is what he propounded, asserted, was the true view of emptiness.
다 돈이 최단지 땡데레 대바만도 고아대 아부 마차나 하상 그 따와들을 차 레라보지라로서 말이야. 어떤 거야 내가 누웠을 때.
So if one doesn't truly understand dependent origination, and because of dependent origination, there is a lack of true establishment, it's very, very easy to fall into Hashan's view of nothingness.
어디 돈을 고아대 아부 차면나 안는 아주 조친 당 샤친듯이 뭐뭐 시행은 누웠어. 어디서 그 하상 그 따와간 레라보지 버렸을 때.
So if one doesn't understand emptiness well and understand the dependent origination and so forth, then if one tries to practice Dzogchen or Mahamudra or these higher teachings, you will only come up with the view of Hashan in your practice. So we can find in Lama Tsongkhapa's great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment this explanation of mistaken and non-mistaken methods.
So
this is now in English, and we can find the section on single-pointed concentration in that text.
사제가 왔는데 좀 말해서 나쪽 생데 라보진 좀 말하고래서 생데 라보진 좀 말하고래서
Yes.
안에 라보지 되게도 와
Lesso.
라보진 나보
Lesso.
안에 나쪽 생데 라신다 모래서 안에 나쪽 생데 되네 생도 좀 뭐도 그래서 나쪽 생 가르산다 당래서 생도 녀몽 슐로 거스 여자도 혼도 슐로 거스 어떤이 소다 하는 가중에 손체도 거스 새들 신에 아부 고네 새 템버 아부 조토바이나 아니 게 슐로 거스 띵에서 고아 계셔 버려서 손도 거스.
So we went over the higher training in ethics previously, and now we've arrived at the higher training in concentration. The higher training in concentration is speaking about meditation itself. And it's stated that our minds at this point are like a black or a dark, crazy elephant that is just running rampant. And this is symbolic of our afflictions that push our mind to and fro and here and there, and where our mind is pushed around in the same way that a black, crazed elephant would be. And translators note the reason it's black is there's a famous painting where one subdues the black elephant and it becomes white. It isn't a reference to anything negative. It's a painting. So that's translators' note. So by relying upon meditation, we can stabilize our mind so that we can be the ones that are in control of it, and we can set it in any direction single-pointedly that we want, and we won't be pushed around by the afflictions themselves. So this is the reason that single-pointed concentration and meditation are so important.
that shene gone karso gore shene gombe chu shene second ta watne shene dingen jende dane shabad nabal chewa yo mar nabal yo ar shabal yo ares ne dingen jenda 제가 하바송데 샤바다 나박고 투모아레스
Less so.
샤발야 추티 요아레 딩엔지가 라바 요아레 셰라고 라바 요아레 남발레 요아레스 남발달 하비 추티 라바다 딩엔지 라바다 셰라지 라바스 셰르발 하비 하바송 요아레스 와드르기 샤바자르마도 시네다 두르가 샤바 나바 투모아레스.
Okay, so when we speak of calm abiding, and we speak of single-pointed concentration or meditation, this is not something that's exclusive to the Buddhist tradition. In non-Buddhist traditions, there is the achievement of calm abiding. There is the achievement of a single-pointed concentration. So these, we can say, are in common with other traditions. But these higher trainings are technically called the highest higher training in ethics, the highest higher training in concentration, the highest higher training in wisdom. And by adding that highest higher training, by adding that word, this makes it exclusive to the Buddhist tradition, and it makes these trainings have exclusive ideas that are not found in other traditions. So there are meditations that are in common with non-Buddhist traditions, and the achievement of single-pointed concentration and calm abiding is completely possible, but the goal is different.
What I shene to go to that me ba karle than me ba shene me ba karasandane shene gonguris tiba ina and me ba karon chidala in gala java laundo de ultul dua me ba karon me ba karon ban halamine gomba ina had me pares tingazi halamine shene gomba ina had shene me pares doni lamine shene gomba ina doni shene me pares Shilamine, Shene Gubaina, Shid Shene Mibaris, and Hanam, the Lamine Gubaina, not Shene Mibas again, Shene was on Tasa Udele Mibalas, Miba, Marbe.
Nga Donagare.
Ah.
Is Nga Miba. Ale. Okay. So when we speak of calm abiding and single-pointed concentration, we speak of objects of observation. There needs to be an object of observation of that concentration. So if one is, for instance, meditating exclusively on emptiness, then emptiness is the object of observation for the single-pointed concentration. Or if one is meditating upon a mantra garland, or any of the other objects of observation, these objects become objects of observation of the calm abiding meditation or of the single-pointed concentration. So it says in the lamp for the path to enlightenment, the Shiloka Kagi, the Lord Ula.
Tamut Shishan, and I percent draw.
Ngay dasang.
Tamong
Here.
Shena Gombi, Miba Karon Chetala, in the Galajabas and do it. Was my year. Miba Karon Chetala, in the Galajabas.
The Kali Abuduk.
Kalendro.
Kontu Zuba Yure. Let's go. Ngay Lung Dang. Shiloka the Trankare.
Miba Karon Chetala, in the Galajabas.
Mipa, okay, Ngay Dagi. Just want to check something technically out.
Miba Karon Chetala. Lando Gadon do Sando Dangazo. Ah.
Nishu. Namang Etonzo. Mipa Garum. There.
Do it.
The Trangare. Sumju.
The shit in the Tolo.
The Jipju Sumju. Got it. Okay.
What the Jeju Marve?
Yeah. Jipju. Rasar.
Jejundu, Jeju.
Jipju.
What the Katudu, you as a Talmum Royaris.
The Ngama, the Chiran, the Tamama
Lapsar.
the Chipa. Not Chipa Lapsar.
Oh, yeah.
Yinning tearing a dog.
What the Katu
Chipa Lapsar.
London, what the song.
So I just wanted to check today. I've translated this many times. I just want to make sure I'd been translating it right. I was, but just wanted to check today because we had the root text. So we can find in the root text, if you go to number 40, you can find here where Atisha says, thus maintaining well the conditions mentioned. We'll go over that, obviously, later. In the collection of meditative stabilization chapter, place the mind on any one virtuous focal object. So here, the emphasis is on virtuous, and it says any one. So here, this is speaking of what is the appropriate object of observation for a practitioner to use for single-pointed concentration.
What Sanjay Takasure, Shene Gongan, Yang Kazagari, Kashin Docha Shecho Yungres, Kashi Kondu Shecho Yuaris, Kashi Tomu Shecho than Yungres, Kashi Naje Shecho Yungres. Ne docha sheshabaina maduba gongina yavures oto sondu waris marba
The tamche lap dire
kondu sheshabaina shamba gongwaris marba tena ngaje sheshabaina madaba gongwaris tamu sheshabaina tende deba maduba no tene gongwe mare.
Okay.
What tene momuji sonwaris.
So when one engages in meditation, various different beings have various affinities for negativity, various different kinds of affinity towards negativity. Some have a stronger problem with attachment, others have a stronger problem with hatred, some have a stronger problem with delusion or ignorance, some have a problem with pride. So there have been instructions given on practices to do that serve as opponents to these negative states of mind. It's been stated that if one has a large amount of attachment, it's good to meditate upon ugliness of the body or impurity of the body or impurity in general. If one has a greater level of aversion or hatred, it's beneficial to meditate upon love. If one has a greater problem with pride, it's good to meditate upon impermanence. If one has a greater problem with ignorance or delusion, it's good to meditate upon dependent origination and the nature of reality. So for all of the delusions, we see that they have specific antidotes.
That's what they Yaji when the mountain sell not to move. I could not do judge low man, sell Maji with the not to Shechunduna, and the Unjung over Dansa in the hours.
The U pardons, the Changaja.
The Tangajan.
Okay. So if one has a bigger problem with conceptuality or with conceptual thought, if the mind is very busy, then one exercise that is helpful is counting the breaths. By relying upon focusing on the coming and the going of the breath. That's literal, the coming and the going of the breath, and counting it. So that is a technique one can use to lessen conceptuality or to calm a busy mind.
Well, that the name, that Shabbat took a bit of Shinam, the Lemini Gongo, Kashi Yulman, Dukavan now. And the Yunamata, what the little meaning, Shine going to words, Marbe?
Do Garbo, Shin, Dang.
Karamina going to words.
So, whatever one wishes to use as an object of observation, one can achieve calm abiding. If one wishes to use a white stone or a stick, one could achieve single-pointed one could achieve calm abiding by using this as its object of observation of the calm abiding.
Or that the name, Zuchin Yale, Mamma Suguru, the Suku Selamine, and the Sangutin, Selamine, Shinegua, Shaken was, Selamine. Tanga Sukasu, that the Jion doing also some Chen Matan does Roshis de Gungazo. What this Salagenda Matabaji, and then the Hashanga Dabu. Do sometimes Jenda San Matabaji. What the Tagaron Santene?
So when we speak of calm abiding and the achievement of calm abiding in the Dzogchen or in Mahamudra, the focal point or the object of observation is the nature of the mind itself, So one needs to completely block out all other external things and focus solely on the nature of the mind. Now, can't you see how easy it would be to fall into the misconception of the Hashan view in those higher schools because of the abandonment of all other objects and the focus on the nature of the mind? So here we can see how easy it is to fall into this mistaken Hashan view if one isn't educated or isn't educated enough in order to study these higher schools. So one uses the nature of the mind and sees everything as mind. So I can, as a translator, see another problem. Sees everything as mind and tries to focus on the nature of that mind itself and sees all other things coming as a manifestation from that nature. So it's very easy to fall into the mistaken view. And I see sometimes an older gentleman comes to class and he studies Dzogchen and he has a text, and this text is a text that I'm actually familiar with in Tibetan, and it's a very advanced, difficult text, and in that text you'll find the explanation of the focus on the nature of the mind, and that is one of the key facets of the Dzogchen practice.
Mari Dubiongo Coajan, Ribarango Trubates, Mari Dubiongo Mari Biongo Coderis, Ribarango Trubates, Sen Modrigine, Saint Rango Abishizuna, on Qual Trunugris, what then she
Quad true
quality Tabalduris, Tabalduris, Mari Dubiongo Coajan, Ribarango Trubates, and Nimi Yon to yours, Nima. What then Alulta, the two Coyable machine, the Lutal Dugoris.
So within the Nyingma tradition, we find the quote that the what is the Ripa is a different word in the Dzogchen tradition. Anyone study Nyingma a lot? What the Ripa is called? The NGK Ripa Dzogchen the Sik Kaka Pecha Chegadu. What do they? It's like awakening. Nobody, no. I haven't studied much Dzogchen. There's a specific word. Okay, we're going to call it Ripa. It's like a level of knowledge or knowing or nature. It's like the nature of the mind, really, the Ripa, the true nature of the mind. I just don't know what the one word is, but that's what it basically means. There's a statement that says, it is the mistaken ignorance which is abandoned by knowing the true nature of the mind. Here we can see that if one isn't well learned, you could mistakenly think that everything comes to mind and that there is nothing or some sort of nihilistic view of emptying that mind completely. Then Lama Tsanlo Dangamare, Jema Tsanlo Dangamare, Tandat Tsanlo Dang.
Tanda de Sanus Gaima, Saint Lulusha, Saint San Gaima Damachi. I know Don San the Chadu. What tell me? Don Badas.
Don Garbo.
Don't come.
No, Yamadabe.
The common don't was on the jig. Who tells on that? Tell me, she ain't going to
Then the Shilopa Nampa.
Jenda Kalis on the Matamba in the Sel Karchag. Jenda Sanction Matamba in the Hotel Trida. Sel Karchag to Trida.
That's go. The Tambo de Kejo then it's sure. That's go. So also in many texts one can find various explanations and can find the explanation of the arisal of the mind. Then the Anja Suranang.
Then the religion has to Kasan does. Jenda Sanction Matan. Those then the Sel Karkuandus.
So if then one doesn't think about the past and one doesn't think about the future and one tries to not focus on the moment, what is left in the mind itself that one thinks of? That's the question. So there also is something Rinpoche said before. You could also, a conch shell can be used as an object of observation. Anything that one wishes to use as an object of observation is sufficient and you can achieve calm abiding through it. But what Rinpoche's question is if we don't focus on the past and we don't focus on the future, what are we focusing on? Where is that moment? Because the moment, there can be broken into past and future, every moment. So what are we focusing on? That's Rinpoche's question. So when we think of this is, whatever we're coming up with is the focus of the calm abiding. There is an object of observation there. But so that's the question, and Rinpoche is saying that there is an object of observation there, in that. So we could call that state where there is no thinking whatsoever, that blank state, we could call that calm abiding. That could be named calm abiding.
And the Sanji Kunam, Sanji Kulsan, tell me the Goina, Govani Waris, Chujin, Goma was Chujil thing and the do.
But by focusing on, for instance, the body of a Buddha or a statue of the Buddha or the form of a Buddha, two things are accomplished. We're able to achieve single-pointed concentration, and also we're accumulating virtue.
So
we need to imagine that our object of observation is a Buddha, and that object of observation is very, very small, very small in front of us, and is very heavy. Jugut Sapo. So the reason for having this object appear to be quite heavy and stable is to abandon the two objects, the two distractions, which are excitement and dullness. So the two distractions that can come into our meditative states.
And then Chenrezig,
so then there are those who like to use Tara, or like to use Medicine Buddha, or Manjushri, or any of the other deities as their objects of observation. You would use all the other deities in the same exact way that you would Buddha Shakyamuni, or the Buddha image. Same exact way. So it's whatever you wish to use as your object of observation, but should choose one and utilize that. So one should find out which you have an affinity for and use that. So one should use one object of observation. One should not rely upon many different images, because it's very difficult if if you use more than one image or you have many different images to achieve that single pointed state. So one should not think of many different things. One needs to focus on one. So say, if, for instance, we are meditating upon Chenrezig, we can imagine in the space in front of us more detailed. We can imagine a lotus with the moon disk and the syllable Shri on top of the moon disk with the mantra garland Om Mani Padme Hum circumambulating the syllable Shri in the center. So when we're doing meditation upon Chenrezig, we could add these details.
And the Magil hang a tinwa shin to tower. What the little mean of Gumbayina, and then she net that thing how to do Lel Habu
Shin to Trawa.
Shin to tower, no, shin to clean versus a woman.
Shin to Trawa, the Injit Sikh Jason, Shin to Trawa.
Shin to towers good.
Chun Chun.
Tanga to Shakalama, the Sheba Rabaka Meva Chas or Migi Sheba Yomare, Nai Sheba, Nai Sheba.
Subtle consciousness. Okay, okay. So it's the subtle consciousness within the tantric vehicle. One can use, for instance, Guhya Samaja or Hevajra or Chakra Sambhava or Kala Chakra, and the highest vehicle. One can use those deities as the object of observation, and then can use the mantra garland, which can recognize the true nature of the mind. Yoga Tantra deities, the true nature of the mind.
And the governor what the Tagaran was Gungors. And Lagonanda, Sedeju Gona Jibaris, Tambo, Yabuchi Shibaji, and Machibaji on the Gungors.
So we come here and we have all these objects and paintings and so forth. But when we leave here, we don't necessarily have them. So how do we use them in our practice? We need to first observe the object very carefully. Figure out what the hand implements are. Observe the object with our eyes very carefully to see all the details in that object. And then once we've done that, we need to get to the point where we don't forget the details of the image. And then once we've done that and we've gotten to the point where we're familiar with that object of observation very thoroughly, we won't forget the details, and anywhere we go, we can use that object of observation in our meditation, and we don't need anything external to guide us. Whatever one wishes to meditate upon, whatever that one object is that you choose, it's whatever the one object that is chosen to meditate upon, one must first completely observe the details of it with your eyes, look at it and observe the details of it, and then not forget what those details are. So when, for instance, we've looked at a tanka of a Buddha, and we've observed it very carefully and studied it, and we get to the point where we don't forget the details, then we should use the meditation at the space in front of us. We should have a very clear image in front of us, mental image. The image should be very clear. That's our aim, is to get it clearer and clearer. So the image that we choose as our focal point should be very clear. So one could also focus on the breath, the coming and the going of the breath, and that would not be forgotten. One could just single-pointedly focus on the breath. So whatever one meditates on, it's beneficial for our minds. Oh, the nature of the mind is, the nature of our mind is very busy. So our minds are very busy, and we seem to remember all these things again and again, and we seem to remember things, and our minds become busy, and when we meditate upon focusing on the breath, we can lessen that a little bit. It's definitely the antidote for conceptuality or conceptual thought. So if this is beneficial, if this alone is beneficial for you, you should do this. Jetsun Shamba Bechagare. Okay. Mahayana Sutra Alankara. Alankara. Yeah. Mahayana, the Do. The Sutra Do.
One do the Jen goes Sazan and then Saddle Den, Dingens Gumbaina, Zobul Nasa Majibaina, Sazan was. And then to come out dinner Sazan is not Zobul Nasa Maris, Kamagun Rigos.
So we can find in Lord Maitreya's text, the Mahayana Sutra Alamkara, or the ornament to Mahayana Sutras, we can find that Maitreya states that it's important to have a positive place or a positive dwelling. And this meaning of this is like a disease-free area, somewhere where we won't have environmental difficulties. But where we are now, in our house, that's a disease-free environment, so we can do meditation in our house, and it seems to fit into the appropriate place for meditation according to Maitreya. It needs to have good water, because if the water is good, then it'd be beneficial for the body. Wild animals.
And Jizobul nobody can do Junda, Tata, Singer, and the Menda, nobody can Yona, and Nezamo Maris, never maybe Saja, and the Ina Nezons.
It needs to be a place where there are not harmful inhabitants. And harmful inhabitants refer to wild animals or spirits and so forth. Any inhabitants that are harmful to someone. If that place has them, it's not an appropriate place for meditation, according to Maitreya. And good friends, positive friends. So here, this refers to, good friends refers to Dharma acquaintances, or spiritual friends, spiritual acquaintances, because you could talk with one another about spiritual things and ask questions, and one person might know the answer, the other person can to the question the other person has. So if one is going to do a long meditation, it's necessary to have someone helping you. Oh, okay. So, Ngay Sampa, the Sacha Tsuchim. Okay, so it's necessary for the practitioner to have a foundation in ethical behavior. So if we have all of these things together, then we can easily have the arisal of single-pointed concentration. And one thing that okay, I'm okay. this is what I forgot. And it was just a question that I had. Rinpoche didn't, but I'll translate it anyway. It's necessary to have ethics in order to produce concentration, because without ethics, concentration can't be produced. When we speak of ethics, it's not necessary for one to be ordained. It's not speaking of only a monk or a nun. It's ethics in general, ethical behavior in general.
And
the non-Buddhist traditions are able to achieve calm abiding, and many of them don't have monks and nuns and ordained people. So we can see that it's possible to achieve without ordination. So slowly, as we stabilize our minds, we will achieve calm abiding. So as one's mind becomes more stable and the single-pointed concentration level is strengthened, once one achieves calm abiding, then the coarse afflictions are all eradicated. The more subtle afflictions are not, but the coarse afflictions are eradicated when one achieves the state of calm abiding. And we can see that in even the non-Buddhist traditions, the ability to achieve calm abiding. And then once one achieves that, there are various levels, and one can achieve even the state of clairvoyance and the ability to understand the workings of others' minds. So all of these can be achieved through single-pointed concentration and the achievement of calm abiding, which can be achieved by Buddhists as well as non-Buddhists. Jampemba, the Jewang Ama Chini Datugudu Gangisan Konsun then Penji. Oh, Konsu de Kelangadu. So the Jampembas are a sect that are actually a Hindu sect. So the Jampembas, which are a Hindu tradition in ancient India, an ancient India tradition, is that Samkhya? I believe it's Samkhya. I have to look it up, but they are able to see past and future lives, but they're only able to see one or two in either direction, past or future. So we can see that they have clairvoyance, and here's an example of non-Buddhists who've achieved the state of single-pointed concentration, because clairvoyance can't be achieved without it. So they have achieved that state, but they assert that there aren't any other lives than the ones that they can see. So they don't believe that there's anything before the ones they can see or anything after the ones they can see. They only assert that there is the past and the future that they are able to cognize through their clairvoyance. But it isn't, their clairvoyance isn't fully realized, and that's why they can't see everything the way as a fully enlightened being can.
안에 사지 응어시디 팀의 응어시래 뭐하시 어떤 구좀 뭐라 해서
So there are all kinds of levels of clairvoyance. There's the level of clairvoyance that this Ajahn Pemba might have, where he or she can see one or two past and future lives. Then there's the kind of clairvoyance that a Hinayanist or a lesser vehicle practitioner has. Their clairvoyance would exceed that of the non-Buddhist tradition, their clairvoyance. But then we have the Mahayanist, the fully realized Mahayanist or Buddhas who have a level of clairvoyance that far exceeds the level of clairvoyance of even a fully realized lesser vehicle practitioner. So we can see that clairvoyance has various levels, and one's ability to see more subtle things depends upon the level of the clairvoyance. There are some who have a great level, some have a medium level, and some have a small level.
저는 것이 계속 해만 것이 여기 지워르스. 것이 여기 지도 것이 매긴 거리바 장부 지워르스. 안에 바주질 법이제요르스 비비. 바주 개와로 말이야.
Don't a cow.
그거 너를 보고 요르스.
Less so.
안에 것이 여기 있던 권이 지워르스. 너를 보고도 가내진도 왔어. 것이 여기 있던 지워르스. 것이 여기 있던 안에 비비도 비고 가버진도 왔어. 그때 것이 그때 너를 통고해서 봤다. Bigu kabo.
Biku gare.
Bigu sinde.
Horn.
The horn. Why horn? No. Kabo rejaste. Mweshi yakan dusu tedi te. Kya chune dusu
The
kabo.
tamche shingyu
Kabo
in
rejaste.
mingare.
Bigu se.
Biku donagare.
Inche karsa.
Shingme.
Inche.
Oh, is he speaking the Injike rebe?
Inche mar. Vegiro de toba lo toba. Bigu lagro. Yutan. Bigu lagre.
The Ming. Forehead.
The forehead.
Okay.
Head.
Okay. Okay. All right. So there's a story of previous times when there was only one word in the whole story I couldn't get, and it was making the whole story. So there is previous times of two people. One had clairvoyance and one did not. And the one who did not asked the gentleman or the lady who had clairvoyance, if you have clairvoyance, tell me about the baby in the cow's stomach. There was a cow there who had a baby in her stomach. And he said he was able to tell that there was a white dot on the forehead of the cow that was in the stomach of the woman.
That baby, the Nama Kabu is a Nama Kabu and of course, if I jump the people covered I made us. Nama Kabu Ingrid does. Ama the Nama Kabarishas, Bibi the Nama the Kabu Ingrid, tell why. You want to tell the cover the cover was.
So then, okay, I get it. It's not that funny though. So then, when the baby came out, it actually had a white tail and not a white spot on the head. So he actually mistakenly saw the ass of the cow and not the face. So the person who was very intelligent made fun of him by saying that he had his ends confused. So someone who has clairvoyance can see certain things. But these days, scientists have machines to be able to see these things. So this is an explanation of clairvoyance, a little explanation. But if one uses the clairvoyance in order to fulfill the needs of other sentient beings, then this is the most beneficial use of clairvoyance. So then the smart person was able to say, you don't have to rely upon those realizations, you can use inference, and you can rely upon a correct sign. Look at the mother cow. She has a white tail. You can infer that the baby has a white tail because she's going to have because she had a white. The baby will have a white tail because she had a white tail. So for people like us who don't have clairvoyance, we have to rely upon analysis. We have to rely upon our intelligence. So is there a previous life? What's the reason? Is there a future life? What's the reason? The Jewa Shema, Jewa Ngama, the Chik Jesung, Chiran Som Lapsong, Jewa Ngama, Jewa Shema. Okay, so whatever, those of us who do not have clairvoyance can rely upon a correct sign. So what is the reason there is a past life? What is the reason for future life? What is the reason for impermanence? I remembered. So what is the nature of these things? So we have to rely upon analysis to be able to arrive logically at an inferential, valid cognition. We can see that the weather man, meteorologists and so forth, they rely upon correct signs to be able to predict the weather. They rely upon reasons that various tools have given them, signs that have been shown to them in order for them to say that next week or tomorrow or whenever there will be a hurricane, there's rain coming, there could possibly even predict an earthquake. They can predict all of these various things, and the way that they can do this is by relying upon a sign, just as we do, by using reason and analysis. By depending upon a large number of reasons, this is the method that we can employ to understand these things. All phenomena are not truly established because they dependently originate. So here we see a statement with a sign. All compounded phenomena are impermanent because they are a compound. So we need to think of many reasons for things and come up with reasons to state our thesis or to reasons for our assertions. So when we look at this clairvoyant person and the person who used their intelligence and used analysis, we can see that the person who came to could come to a conclusion through analysis by saying, oh, the mother had a white tail, so the baby will probably have a white tail, actually is more accurate than the person who had mistaken clairvoyance. So we can see that analysis and our intelligence sometimes is more important than clairvoyance. So it's not that the clairvoyance itself was mistaken. It's the person who saw the wrong end, saw the white on the forehead when it was really the tail that was mistaken. It wasn't the clairvoyance itself. So we will slowly go through these pages of the text, and it looks like today we're probably finished, and we'll do the concluding prayers, and we'll continue next week. If anyone comes to all these classes and doesn't understand Buddhism completely, by the time this text is done, this is one of the most intensive, all-inclusive teachings I have ever heard. Spending a year on a 20, how many stanzas is this? 68 stanzas? So we'll do all the concluding prayers in Tibetan. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru. Sorry about that. I just said we're going to do it in Tibetan and then started in English. I apologize, everyone. We'll do it in Tibetan. Dagi jine sabenge wadi Nendandro wakun la gambendan Jepa jetsun lozan drapai Nenbe nimbo rindu zenyejo Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niradayami Yambe Bavu Jita Jendada Gondu Sampo Deyan Dejinde Deda Kunji Jesu Dalo Jen Gewa Deda Tanche Ratung O Duzum Shepe Yawa Tanche Li Ngawa kan la chutu ngapade Dajen gewe tsawa tikunjan Sampo chuchi ratu ngowani Amri rawe ngorwe shinyam dir Bendan dewa malu jongwene Chenrezig wan Tenzin yazoi Jambezine mardu Lozun zambo yunyen ala yun rin yamban zemeng ewishin lonan domenen madzin shema Khensur Wanda Rinjin Janin Jo Lord Unye Jongan Mumbatse Gabe Gozum Donga Chudzin Da jodun du nuzan darunyin Ge